Femi Boyede, you want to make a comment before we bring in people who have raised up their hands to contribute?
Oh, yes, thank you very, very much, Lady K. And by extension, thank you also to Engineer Olowo Okere, to Mr. Erumabo and Dr. Omolara Akonji for the very attention that you paid to the respective angles that you spoke on. So I think from my point of view, I think we need to understand, and that was made very clear by both Dr. Akonji and Mr. Erumabo. Exchange rates cannot successfully and reasonably be legislated. They cannot be commanded into being. They cannot be fixed by government fear. Let's start off by commending the CBN for, first and foremost, rapidly closing something that benefited less than 1,000 Nigerians out of 200 million. The different exchange rates was targeted at enriching. I don't have the actual figure, but I know that there are less than 1,000 Nigerians who day in, night out were benefiting from the multiple exchange rates. The former CBN governor, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, made this assertion as far back as 2020, that people just sit down on their phones, get official dollar at official rate from the CBN and transfer him to the free funds market. And you saw that people were making 350 Naira difference between the I&E window and what was trading in Zone 4 or in Ikeja. And for that, we should celebrate the current administration and the central bank. However, my understanding and expectation is that while this has been done, there needs to now be an immediate emplacement of interagency engagement, wherein the Central Bank of Nigeria can get feedback as expressed by our resource persons this morning. If I took every point I have here, I will take time, and I have actually been on the back of previous speakers as per time management. However, permit me to give you an example from the Canada market. As of 2019, Canadian dollar to Naira was about 360, 370, maximum 390. As at that time, a kilo of Gari from us, the bulk importers, to the wholesalers here was accepted. They bought from us, the bulk importers, at between 74 and 80 Canadian cents per kilo. As at 2019, a kilo of Gari in Nigeria was between 140 and 173 Naira per kilo. So we barely managed to get between 5 and 7 cents per kilo, depending on what you imported here. Okay, now we have a floating Naira where a Canadian dollar goes for between 630 and 650 today. You may say that it is very, very positive and profitable for the exporter because he gets more Naira for his single dollar. However, you need to also think back that the person, the exporter who is going to earn this many Naira for dollar now needs many more Naira to buy that unit that I was buying at 143 Naira. Today, a kilo of Gari in Nigeria is at least 470 Naira. The price here has not changed. I'm still going to sell to Mosaic or to Davisol. I'm still expected to sell at a maximum of 80 Canadian cents. So until the central bank that evolved this policy is made to understand that there are so many other factors that play in international trade, everybody will be misled or will be easily led into believing that the exporter is now earning more Naira. Let us look at export from the four wheels of export: the supply base, one; the market where it is sold, two; what joins them together, that is the logistics, three; and four, the trade financing, which Wilson mentioned a lot about. So policy, for it to be robust, needs to have collective ownership. And for it to have collective ownership, it must evolve from an involvement of everyone who has one role or the other, or who will have suffer or benefit one way or the other from policy. I'll rest it here for now and come back later, but please let us remember also that, and I thank the three of you for pointing it out quite clearly, it is not enough to float the Naira, whether it is managed floating or any other manner of floating. It's not enough. The foreign exchange rate of a country's currency is determined by that country's performance in the international market. And the point here that we have been making even before the Buhari administration, this is an advocacy of close to 30 years. Non-oil export remain the only solution to Nigeria's economic woes. And we are hoping and very, very eagerly awaiting the understanding of this by the Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration. Thank you very much. I rest for now.
Thank you so very much. I'm going to be calling on the people whose hands are raised. I say Kayode Nuraito, Titus Olokiri, Kola Deribibi. Before then, let me read from Kazim Bello. He said, Madam insisted, I'm sure he's referring to Dr. Akonji. Madam insisted that Naira is grossly undervalued. I'm simply wondering and want to ask Madam, what are the parameters of yardstick of reflective quantitative analysis that results in that conclusion that Naira is undervalued? Secondly, what would Madam consider as a reference Naira exchange under the current circumstances? You want to answer, Dr. Akonji? Are you there?
Okay, thank you, Lady K. I'm looking at the purchasing power parity, which the arithmetic I cannot do online, but let me just use a simple example. Take a can of Coke, the same volume, the same volume, the same production. A can of Coke that you buy in London. And the same can of Coke, the same content, the same production, the same company. The purchasing power parity is different, and it has become so widened in this dispensation. It was a bit close in the past, but it has become so widened. And what is causing the wideness is because of our own cost of production here. The lack of infrastructure, no electricity, nothing. And the producing unit here would rather import, bring what they produce in UK to come and sell here. So it is a whirlwind. It is a whirlwind. And in those days when you want to calculate purchasing power parity, you take a basket of commodities that are that are, compatible, that are similar to what you have in your economy, and you put it on a weight. You weight it and get a particular figure. I don't have the luxury of numbers now, but I know what I'm saying. When I was sitting, we use purchasing power parity to calculate what will be the exchange rate. That is the upper and lower rate that we put in the market. So that's what I'm saying. The second point is, what was the second question? If you can help me.
Just a
The
moment.
first was how do I get at the undervaluation?
Yeah, and the second one is the reference Naira exchange under the current circumstances. Secondly,
The reference Naira under this current dispensation, it's when when the central bank puts enough liquidity, when you know the balance of payments, the external balance of the economy, and that the economy can reduce its debt profile, which they are currently doing. I read that the Eurobond had been paid off. Then you would look at the liquidity, your deficits, your net deficits in your balance of payments, and that statement of deficit is sent to central bank on a daily basis. At the end of a close of business, you get the position of your balances as per latest advice. So when you see that balance, you can play with that balance. It's like a treasury management. You play with that balance to be able to ensure that your currency is not too overvalued or too undervalued. And at the same time, you encourage foreign direct investors to know that when they bring in their money, they can always take it back when they want to take it back. So the confidence in the economy brings more liquidity into the economy. I hope I'm making sense.
Thank you very much.
I don't want to be too technical, but I just...
Yes, thank you for breaking it down. Okay, I go to Naira. I see your hand up. Please unmute yourself and put on your camera if possible.
Good afternoon here in the UK, London. Thanks for the opportunity to make my little contribution. I thank the previous speakers for they have been very educative on everything. I'm going to start by the new government policy. We should at least thank the new government for being sensitive enough to start on this on the move that he has made so far, whether on the Naira exchange or the oil. The situation in Nigeria has been such that things have been bad for too long. We cannot expect to take 1,000 steps backward and expect it to be restored within 2 strides. He has started well, but like one of the speakers said, there's still a lot to be done. There's still a lot to be done. We just wish God would give him the wisdom to undo it accordingly. Take, for instance, the small-scale industry in Nigeria is almost as if it's not existing. I could remember in Britain towards the late 80s and early 90s, when the economic situation in the United Kingdom was very bad. What they did was to encourage small-scale industries. They encouraged them through financing and some other things. But in Nigeria, it's almost as if it's not existing. Where are the areas in those days? Where are these industries, small-scale industries in those days? I remember in one of when I was still in the office, one of our management training, we analyzed and discovered that for somebody to start manufacturing industry in Nigeria, it will take 20 years. That is for the company that's even survive and exist. It will take 20 years return on capital employed to be regained 20 years, whereas people now diverted the fund that's supposed to have started industry. If they divert it into politics and they happen to sponsor a phase that become successful, within 6 months, the money invested in that person will be recovered times 10 within 6 months. So those things has discouraged a lot of people from starting industry in Nigeria. So that one need to be restored, to be brought back. The bane of any economy is the small scale industry, and that's not existing in Nigeria at all. Not only that, look at our export, that we are talking about. There's nothing like export guarantee scheme. There should be export guarantee scheme, particularly for the exporters, because that will give them the confidence to start exporting things. I think that's one thing needs to be looked into. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for your contributions. I will call John Isimide before Titus Olowokere. He had his hand up before every other person, but he was kicked out. So please, engineer, be patient. John Isimide, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, I just did. Thank you very much. I just want to make a response to some of the contributions made earlier on. My co-speaker mentioned that the contribution of non-oil exports to the Nigerian economy is just about 10%, which is true. But the one thing we must realize is the changes to the economy would not be overnight. Nigerian economy has been stagnant. The non-oil sector, rather, has been stagnant for so long. It's been neglected because it was easy to make money from oil exports. Now, in the last 5 years or thereabouts, there's been a massive push to grow the non-oil sector. It takes time to do that. And what is relevant and important for us to know is that we are on the right track. If we still have oil, if the number keeps shrinking and there is no positive change in the non-oil sector, then we're in trouble. You also made another point that the small business in Nigeria, they die very quickly. I must mention that this is not just a Nigeria phenomenon. In US and most other countries, it is what it is. The Bureau of Labor Statistics in US show that about 20% of new businesses fail within the first 2 years they open, 45% within the first 5 years, and up to 50% in 10 years. Same thing with most other countries because they're not used to trade. They're not used to doing business. They are retired people just starting anew, or they are too young to understand the economics of scale or the economy itself or the style of doing business. So we don't expect realistically that every business or even a significant number of the business in Nigeria or anywhere in the world will succeed in the first few years. I want to align with what Mr. Boyede mentioned earlier on, that the exchange rates of the country is not the only determining factor of the economic prosperity of the country. It's just one factor to measure growth or to stimulate growth or to improve on the foreign earnings of the country. It's just one. Nigeria's economy is very complex. Every economic policy has the pluses and the minuses. The policies themselves, we are not short of ideas on how to make changes. What we lack in most cases is the strategies for implementation, is how to make things happen, is the leadership that's very decadent, that's very corrupt. I mean, look at the Anchor Borrower program to help farmers. Look at the other intervention programs from the NEPC. These programs work beautifully on paper, but then those who implement them don't implement them correctly. So I've always been an advocate of having the right leadership to make positive changes. So we shouldn't, just to round up, we shouldn't look at any economic policy, any economic activity in silo. We must look at things holistically. We must remain positive and hopeful that even if the changes are not happening now, they're going to happen. We're on the right track. And each one of us will do his or our own parts to make this succeed. And that's one of the reasons I guess we're here, to be all equally informed, encouraged, and motivated to succeed in our respective businesses, regardless of the vagaries in the economy of the country. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And please, today is really very interesting. We are supposed to have 2 more minutes, but we have to extend by just a few minutes. So that means each person that needs to make any comment now, please limit it to 2 minutes, please. Okay, the next person is Johnny Semede. Can you please unmute yourself? Johnny Semede, if you can hear us.
Thank
you, sir.
Thank you very much.
I call him the senior partner of Talking Trade.
No, the issue is that we are not ready to go. I have some of my colleagues who are still here. Jeremy is here. Ziagu is here. Not that we are retired, but things are not working as expected, in line with what we have put in, so that we will not leave the children suffering. First and foremost, let me go with Mrs. Akanji on her position. There is nowhere in the world where people don't work on their currency. But the issue, we should first of all ask ourselves, how did we get here? When the monetary policy was modeled up with the fiscal policy, and selling and buying of the Naira became the easiest job to do in Nigeria. Even when exporters were crying that we cannot use about 15 different rates, we were asked to export at one rate and pursue ABC, the shipping charges and all that. That was where we got the whole thing wrong. When Madam said that the Naira is overvalued, it is neither here nor there. But the truth of the matter is that we cannot hold up that the Naira is overvalued. One thing we should put first in our mind, when we were using the pound shilling pence, the dollar was 25 kobo to be 25 pence. And when the Naira was introduced, it became 50 kobo. Why today 800? The first thing we should ask ourselves is the rate at which we are treated in Naira and buy and sell it on the street. Vis-a-vis, we are not producing anything. If a country like Nigeria, that the GDP at independence was from agriculture over 51%, why are we crying today? And when you look at the convergence, the first thing we should think about is that when you are talking of convergence of currencies, like the one we are pursuing under the ECOWAS project, we have been on it since 1975, and we know the problem. But we are not talking of currencies now, we are talking of exchange rates. If we are now converting exchange rate, I can give you about 12, but others have to talk. If we are now converting, what have we put in place for us now to generate the needed forex? Have we removed the billions outside the banking hall into the banking listing, that if I'm traveling today, that they will stamp this into my passport like what we used to do in the past? The gap is still there. How do we manage what is on the street? Secondly, when we are thinking of export, the first thing we should think about is that what of the cost of raw materials. You have to source your raw material with 800 US Naira to the US dollar. You talk of distribution, you talk of power. These are some of the things. Then finally, the strategy based on what Olowokere has said. There is no strategy, there is no template for us to engage and to change the tide. Finally, what are the benefits? The only benefit I can see is that if we can withdraw the excess or the money people cannot account for in circulation, and the final that is what the president has put in place concerning the commodity board. I have been on it since 1988. If that is the way, then exporters cannot have hope in the export of agricultural produce. If we now say fiat, and we are now merging what we cannot manage, what we cannot measure, we cannot manage. The money is still in the hands of where it belongs, where we had this initial problem. Thank you.